Sleep. It's something we as humans all take for granted. Every single night of every single day, we climb into our bed, dim our lights and close our eyes. For some of us, this ritual occurs at 8 PM, and for others, early into the morning. Regardless, we all do it. Now, the amount of sleep we get depends on many factors. How hard we've worked throughout the day, the amount of coffee we've had, or even what we decide to do right before bedtime. Now, as a chronic sleeper, I've always wondered what it would be like to wake up early. You see, during this quarantine period, I've really placed an emphasis on building and sustaining long-term habits. And one such habit was the idea of waking up super early every single day. Now, if you don't know already, I actually place a very strong emphasis on getting the right amount of sleep. It all started around sixth form time when I glorified this idea of only getting 3 hours of sleep. In my school, we actually did this thing called the IB diploma, and there was this kind of meme or concept whereby you could either get good grades, get enough sleep, or have a social life. And the main catch was you can only have 2 of these things at the same time. Now, obviously we picked having good grades as one of our slots, and as young, mature, responsible young adults, for our final slot we chose to have a social life. Seems like a reasonable decision, you know, a wise choice. To begin with, 3 to 4 hours of sleep was perfectly fine. In fact, if I'm being totally honest, I felt even more productive. There's something about going to bed late, yet waking up before everyone else that makes you feel good, like you're one of those Instagram hustlers.
I don't take vacation.
On top of the psychological benefits, there's also the tangible rewards. Naturally, being awake for longer frees up time in our schedule. The time we once utilised to sleep all of a sudden becomes free. We can now spend time on our hobbies, doing the things we enjoy, such as playing video games or even cooking, all the whilst feeling guilt-free because we've essentially earned back this time. Unfortunately, this didn't last for a very long time. What I failed to realise or account for was this concept of sleep debt. Sleep debt is defined as the cumulative effect of not getting enough sleep. Ultimately, a large sleep debt will lead to mental and physical fatigue. And long story short, I crashed hard. Morning chores became painful. I began sleeping in class. Even hobbies which I originally found really fun became mundane and boring. My mood in general just simply tanked. Now, as stupid as this next bit sounds, I actually had no idea that the issue at hand was me just not getting enough sleep. I just assumed that I was being lazy and lethargic. So what did you do next, I hear you ask? Well, I just cut down on sleep even more. I then entered this endless cycle of sleeping less, being less productive, and therefore sleeping even less to try and catch up on the work that I should have been doing. As you can imagine, this wasn't sustainable and didn't end well, and I actually ended up returning to my normal sleep cycle. I've since stuck to this regular sleep cycle, averaging around 7 to 9 hours per night. However, the same issue which drove me to this futile endeavour in the first place still exists. Productivity. I still feel as though I'm sleeping too much and not getting enough work done, something I find really frustrating. During this whole lockdown / self-isolation type period, I've taken it upon myself to try and become the most productive version of myself possible, with the hope that this will help me in my studies, but also put an end to my ways of just being unproductive and then feeling guilty about my laziness. So I decided to do some research. I read a ton of self-help books, meditated in the hopes of finding answers, and watched a load of YouTube videos before coming to my verdict in regards to the keys to productivity. Morning routines, notably waking up earlier, being consistent and setting goals. I'm never one to shy away from a challenge, so I decided to merge all of these ideas together in order to put an end to my unproductive ways by waking up early, consistently, and crucially on a daily basis. Full of optimism, I went onto the #1 site for life advice and researched a ton of different people's videos in regards to their morning routines and their potential benefits. Pretty much every video I saw talked about waking up at 5 AM, which was what I was going to do, but then I remembered, this is student life. We don't just copy other people's videos, we make our own unique, individual, original content. So instead, I decided I was going to be waking up at 4 AM. The first day was actually a complete disaster. I ended up waking up super late, yet was somehow still super tired. However, weirdly enough, the next couple of days of doing this actually went like clockwork. I found it quite easy and actually rather relaxing. Waking up at 4 a.m. whilst everyone was still asleep and still feeling refreshed was literally just amazing. I felt super productive and was actually done with literally all of my work by like 8 or 9 p.m. Everything was just nice and rosy, I guess. However, quite a few issues arose later on in the week. I began waking up later and later to the point where I just couldn't be asked to keep this challenge going. My levels of motivation decreased exponentially as my body struggled to adapt to the idea of waking up at 4 a.m. having woken up at like 9, 10, 11 a.m. for the past few months. I slowly but surely fell off track, which was an even bigger shot to my levels of motivation as I began to realize that I lacked all sense of self-discipline and couldn't even bring myself to complete a basic challenge. I felt tired, lethargic, and every cup of coffee just seemed to delay the inevitable crash that was ensuing. The main issue that I was having wasn't necessarily waking up at 4 a.m. Rather, getting to bed by 9 or 10 p.m. proved far more challenging than I had realized. You see, we live in a world full of distractions. Gadgets and technology are constantly vying for our attention to the point that the very place we sleep is the same place we consume content. By now, it was pretty darn clear that my strategy just wasn't working. If anything, it was just making me even less productive due to the fact that I was constantly feeling guilty about my continuous
lapse in my judgment.
Now, as a more mature individual to my previous 17-year-old self, I realized quickly that simply plowing through my problems without ever addressing them wasn't the way to go in the long run. And so I went back to the drawing board. One of the key things I learned from reading the self-help books earlier was the importance of having a realistic and systematic approach when attempting to establish new habits. So instead of diving headfirst into my new routine, I decided that I was going to gradually and incrementally change my daily routine so that eventually I would gradually be able to wake up at 4 a.m. instead of just shocking my system into waking up at 4 a.m. from the get-go. Though I was very skeptical, I decided I would just commit and see how things panned out. I kept my expectations low and decided to keep note of my wake up times in my diary in order to hold myself accountable. I also printed off a little tracker that I used to keep track of the days I had failed to meet my goals and stuck this on my door as a source of inspiration. What I found was that by scaling down my goal and committing to just consistently chipping away at it, day after day, with the exception of a few failed attempts, I was far more likely to stick with it in the long run. Eventually, I did manage to meet my target of waking up at 4 a.m. every single day on a consistent basis, which I have to say came with many benefits. I felt rested and motivated and inspired to do my best writing early on in the morning whilst the ideas were still fresh and new in my head. However, come to think of it, there were definitely some downsides. Waking up at like 4 a.m. means that you're probably gonna have to go to bed at around 9 or 10 p.m, which means that you're probably gonna miss out on a lot of the social activities that happen later on at night, such as, I don't know, going out clubbing for example. Likewise, waking up earlier also means that you get tired earlier. I can tell you from experience that going into the first lesson of the day or going into work for that matter, feeling as though you've been awake for 12 or 15 hours, it's not a pleasant experience. However, on a deeper level, I think that the moral of the story is that when attempting to set our goals or build new habits, it's important not to be over ambitious. We need to be deliberate, intentional and strategic with the way we go about things. Diving headfirst into a habit never ends well. Instead, we should scale things up gradually and consistently before finally achieving our goals. That's it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.